Well, I am Kimbrelle Eugene Kyereh, the founder and executive director of Refine Community Empowerment, based here in St. Rose, started in Elkinsville, Freetown, and that's where you are right now. This church building was actually established, the church itself was established by Palmer Elkins back in the 1800s. So this has since been rebuilt because of some damage that we had over the years. But this is Mount Zion Baptist Church. We want to thank Pastor Dixon for opening up these doors to us. And we want to thank you all for coming and taking interest in yourselves, in your family, and in this St. Rose community in St. Charles Parish. So, as you know, this is not only about St. Rose, this is about St. Charles Parish. It's about Louisiana. It's about our United States of America, and it really is about our world. So I'm gonna just show you a quick little PowerPoint here. So we're surviving and we're thriving. Okay. So we're gonna ask my cousin Art, Reverend Art Blue, to say a prayer. I'm gonna show you this PowerPoint as an introduction. After that introduction, we're going to have Mr. Joseph Coco. He's going to present. He's a St. Charles Parish resident. He'll introduce himself more to you. And then we have Tulane Environmental Law Clinic, who's going to come and present and answer our questions. So, Reverend Art.
This is indeed a beautiful day that the Lord has made, isn't it? We will rejoice in me day. John Father, we are so grateful for another day that you have allowed us. We thank you for waking us up this morning, clothed and in our right frame of mind. We thank you for all those that are in attendance tonight. We can't thank you enough for Kimbrelle and Divine Community Empowerment and the Tulane Law Clinic for bringing this knowledge to this community about what's going on that's affecting our health and our safety. We know that we can do nothing without you. And we thank you for the wisdom and the knowledge that you're giving us. And most of all, for the victory that you're giving us in this situation. No ammonia plant in St. Rose. In your son Jesus' name, be named.
Josh, did you have the audience? That's cool. All right, y'all. Let's get started. Thank you, Reverend Art. So this is our mission to educate, uplift, and empower individuals through programs and resources. And I've already introduced a little bit about Elkinsville, Freetown, established by a freedman of color back in the 1880s. He bought these 4 strips of land and had other families to come and settle here. So we have our councilwoman, Michelle Daniels, would like to recognize you. Would you like to say something? How here? Listen to the resolutions. Sure. Okay, just wanted to recognize you. You're welcome. All right. St. Rose Community and IMTT, too close for comfort and continues to encroach upon vulnerable residents. So we have 3 issues that we have identified here environmentally. One is that we're getting these chemicals from IMTT and really all the surrounding industries as well. But IMTT in particular is very close to our St. Rose communities on both sides. And I'll show you that a little bit further in the PowerPoint. I'm going to be quick. So it's just feet away from Elkinsville residents, as you can see here. If you drive down 4th Street here, you can see how close that fence line is on residents' homes. And it wasn't always like that. So St. Rose Community and IMTT, if I could zoom in, and maybe not, But here we have Elkinsville, Freetown. Here are all the tanks, and here is Oaklawn Ridge, very close to the fence line, and they also are very heavily impacted by the chemicals that are emitted into our homes. Next verse.
Trying to hit spacebar, Maggie. Says you can try to hit spacebar, Meg. Yeah, you're at a point.
Oh, okay. So here is IMTT, back when it was early days when it first started in 1923. Here it is in 2018. Just to give you a quick overview, too many chemicals, no monitoring, and now they try to bring a pool of ammonia plant. So it's been here for decades. In 2024, we had residents who stood up for our community, St. Rose Community One Boys, who stood up for clean air and community monitoring back in 2014. So here, my son Joshua found this on YouTube. Many of you know this gentleman, a native here of Elkinsville, Freetown. 7 years ago on YouTube, our fellow resident and St. Rose resident share how IMTT's chemicals are affecting him and his home. Okay, and chemicals are still entering our homes today. I'm just showing you that not much has been done. General Honore stood with us. He said he spent 37 years defending this country, and he'll be, if you've ever seen anything like this. I'm in church, see. Because the protest and stuff. So he worked very, very diligently with our St. Rose community. Work that for me, Josh. Next. So IMTT has had several fires, fines. They continue to expand. They tried to go over on the West Bank in Luling, and the folks in Luling said, nope, you're not coming here in our backyard. And many of us, raise your hand if you were over there in Luling. Yes. So we stood with Luling. No. You're doing too much, IMTT. Next. So although many chemicals enter our community, LDEQ took our community monitor away that our folks stood for in 2014. So we have all of these chemicals plus some that are emitted from IMTT. So these are just a few: benzene, non-carcinogen, naphthalene. These things are causing all these problems in every system of our body. So we did take some samples. Our scientists, we have several scientists here. Ms. Wilma helped us to collect with a Suma canister 2 times, and all of these chemicals were found in our air. Benzene was one of them. Both times a sample was collected of known carcinogen. Toluene and all the rest. And then some of you have this. Go ahead, please. Okay. So the second sample, go ahead, please. So IMTT introduced the residents in 2023, but introduced them to this Richmond air monitor, Richmond Chevron air monitor. They introduced this to residents who went and met with them to ask them about what was going on. However, this is what they're bringing to St. Rose. This is not what they showed us. And that's why I have an issue with that. That they showed us A1 monitoring that's going on in California, Richmond, California. IMTT has a facility in Richmond, California. So that facility is well monitored. However, theirs is well monitored by most of the chemicals that are emitted from that those 2 industries, Chevron and whatever else is around there. Okay, that's not what they're trying to bring to us. They want to collect a bulk, and they'll tell you more about it. Tulane will tell you more about that. So no ammonia plant in St. Rose. Go ahead. All right, if you've done a lot, go ahead, just go quickly. Please. Keep going. All right, keep going. We had our hearings. Thanks to Tulane Environmental Law Clinic, you canvassed another hearing. And many of you were here and helped us with this to show up ourselves. And just show a few more, just go quickly. They shut us down. They said that we were a disruption in that meeting. How many of y'all remember that?
I have a recording of it too if anybody needs to see it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So you share that if you would. Yes. Yes. Just wanted to give you all a quick overview of what has been going on. So this was a rescheduled hearing. This was our last meeting, February 18th, here at Mount Zion. Again, Pastor, thank you for opening up this church to us. We appreciate you, Pastor Dixon, in the back. Continue to advocate for yourselves, please, for your family and for your St. Rose community. And for your the state, your parish and your state. So we have a program called Families Involved. Okay, we have this handout. Some of you have this call to action. Families involved in respect and empowerment. So we want to work with families to help us to advocate for ourselves and favoring our community. Now we're going to have Mr. Joseph Coco, St. Charles Parish resident, Destrehan, Louisiana.
Thank you, Ms. Kimbrelle. I think some of the work you presented kind of reminds me of some things that have been bothering me. I don't. Well, firstly, I want to say it's fantastic that we're all here while encouraging participation.
Matter, baby.
Yeah, I'll get up on the mic a little bit more. I'm sorry about that. I was thinking I might be bothering you all, but obviously I need to speak up a little bit. So one thing that was in your slides, Ms. Kimbrelle, that I noticed is you showed a picture of the port that's on the river next to IMTT, and that my wife went to the
Louder.
sorry. My wife went to the Ormond community meeting that was roughly a month ago.
I recorded that as well.
Yeah, we have a recording of that. If you search my name, just Coco online, that should come up. Hold on, let me type the password. All right, sorry about that. So in that meeting, she brought up that John Bagley, who
CEO, I believe.
it's something like CEO. Yeah, I'll go a little louder here. Requested or that stated that no new structures would be built along the Mississippi. I'm having to change presenter modes here.
If y'all weren't able to make that meeting, it's understandable. They were not clear about who could or could not attend. I believe Mr. Ark was there as well. Yeah. It had very poor attendance because people in Destrehan were just not informed about this meeting. They talked at us for about 40 minutes, and then we were given like 10 minutes to ask questions, and they did not like the questions that we had to ask.
What else selected which questions?
They did. They had us write down our questions in advance, and then they cherry picked which ones they wanted to answer, and then they opened it up to the public, and then they shut that down real quick.
And they turned me away as a boy.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that, but I was not surprised. Art invited me, and I let them know I was invited by a resident of Ormond.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. So, like I was trying to mention, like my wife Becca was mentioning here, she brought up that John Bagley, who's an important member of St. Charles Clean Fuels, he specifically stated that no new structures were going to be built along the river. So what I assume that meant is the screenshot Ms. Kimbrelle showed, which was the current pier, would say as that was. My wife brought up that, yeah, I'll get a little bit louder. my wife brought up that if you look at the United States Army Corps of Engineer screenshots, that you can see clearly they're going to build several structures along a pier. So their excuse was because they're going to be built within the existing footprint of the structure, that doesn't count as a new structure. And then they doubled down on that and said, we never actually said at my, yes, two people, Raman Ramesh, who I believe is the CEO, and John Bagley, who's some kind of engineer, who's important there, stated that they never said that, even though it was reported on the news and broadcast throughout the entire parish. So I think that that's ridiculous. That wasn't actually part of the presentation. Your screenshot just reminded me of that. And I haven't had a chance to vent that other than a short YouTube video that I played. But I'm Joseph Coco. I'm a resident of St. Charles Parish. I wanted to thank Ms. Kimbrelle and Refining Community Empowerment for inviting me here. So I'm doing much of what she's been doing, what Tulane Law has been doing, just at a much smaller level because I'm a single person. I'm trying to bring the voices of the residents here to the wider community. I want to show that people here don't necessarily want this plant, and I want to dissuade anyone from having anything to do with it. So I'm, for the most part, going to be talking about LOTTE Chemicals and their connection to the St. Charles Clean Fuels Ammonia plant. I got the information from LOTTE's own sustainability reports, as well as community testimony from local public hearings, such as the ones we talked about, the LDEQ, and some others. And I generated a report that I'm hoping will highlight the discrepancies between LOTTE's, which is a potential customer of St. Charles Clean Fuels. I'm hoping to show that the discrepancies between LOTTE's environmental sustainability and governance commitments and the community response to St. Charles Clean Fuels will encourage LOTTE to reconsider their desire to purchase ammonia from St. Charles Clean Fuels. So the idea is we're going to cut off their customers, and hopefully they won't have an interest in opening this plant here. I'm not currently organizing any campaigns, as I'm still waiting to hear back from LOTTE. I sent off that report last week, so we'll see where it goes from there. I want to give you some background on how I got started on this. As I mentioned, I'm independent. I'm just like you, a stakeholder, a community member who doesn't want this plant here. So the first thing I started doing was I started looking into the site selection and the government permits. LDEQ shared some information about what they were going to be doing, and I kind of latched onto that and started looking into some of those the agencies that were involved in the permits. So this is, I'm going to be showing you the current statuses of the 15 major permits I'm aware of for this facility. It's mostly from state agencies, but there's some federal and some St. Charles Parish. But getting information about these permits has been difficult. Many of these permits haven't been filed yet, so it's just something that is going to need to be happening nebulously in the future. So there's potentially opportunities for citizens such as ourselves to raise concerns through the official channels, but I'm not positive how many of these agencies accept public feedback. If anyone knows if the FFA, the USCG, State Fire Marshal, LOTTE, or CPRA accept public comments, I would love to talk to you so that we can know if we can get some sort of involvement in that. The Coastal Protection and Restoration Agency and the U.S. Coast Guard have been very difficult to contact. I've reached out multiple times, but haven't received any kind of response. So I really wasn't accomplishing much. I was spending time researching, spending time trying to communicate, and just not hearing a whole lot of response as to what's going on with these permits and whether or not they accept public comment. Then I remembered reading about Tulane Law Clinics getting funds to try to dissuade a petrochemical plant in a nearby parish from opening up there. They were actually successful in that, if I recall. That seems a little out of my depth. I don't know how to approach a major bank and tell them that they're doing something stupid that the community doesn't want. But I did realize that before these conglomerates can even get a loan, they need to show the banks that they have customers. So often that's done through somebody called a memorandum of understanding, which is essentially just a customer like LOTTE Chemical saying, yeah, and I would buy your blue ammonia if you provided it to me. So that led me to this announcement on March 5th of last year that LOTTE Chemical signed a memorandum of understanding with Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners, which is one of the parent companies of St. Charles Clean Fuels. They signed this to agree that they would like to purchase blue ammonia from the proposed facility. It also mentions some green ammonia from other sources, but I'm much less concerned about that. And I just want to let you know, LOTTE is a major South Korean chemical corporation with global operations. So the next step was discovering that LOTTE has made some impressive commitments to sustainability and ethical business practices. All of their goals are shared in this public lengthy report. So I got to reading and found that they have made explicit commitments to reducing their impact, delivering benefits to stakeholders, which includes everyone here, the residents of St. Rose, reducing discriminatory practices, and sharing benefits. They've also made explicit commitments to these global human rights groups. Since it seems LOTTE Chemical isn't aware of what's going on here in St. Charles Parish, I wanted to tell them the facts. The carbon dioxide promises are just that, promises. Our environment will be impacted by the displacement of hundreds of acres of wetlands and the displacement of fresh water and industrial runoff into Lake Pontchartrain. Virtually no one here in the parish wants this. Tulane Environmental Law Clinic, myself, and others have pointed out that this facility should be regulated as a major source air polluter, and LDEQ has shown bias against locals. So when we compare LOTTE's stated principles from that ESG report that I was talking about with the reality of the St. Charles project, we find significant contradictions. Their claim of creating social value doesn't align with the serious health impacts this facility would have on our community. Their representation commitments to diversity and inclusion stand in stark contrast to the environmental justice concerns this project raises. Their area selection reveals a disconnect between their human rights framework and the decision to place this facility in an already marginalized community. And despite promises of public growth with local communities, St. Charles Plain Fuels faces overwhelming community opposition. These contradictions aren't just inconsistencies, they represent fundamental misalignments with LOTTE's own published values. In short, when we examine LOTTE's claims versus reality, we find crap. Excuse my language. These are just a few of the major community voices that have spoken out at public hearings. I ended up quoting Kimbrelle and her several times. She's done a great job speaking for our community. I've included quotes from 16 community members in my stakeholder report to illustrate some of the ESG commitment contradictions. These community voices highlight consistent patterns of concern about environmental health impacts, unanimous community opposition, threats to cultural heritage in historical significant areas like here in Elkinsville, and the broader context of Cancer Alley. In my stakeholder report, I use these community voices, much like a lot of us are doing here today, to highlight these four misalignment areas: environmental justice and community consent, carbon capture efficacy, community engagement, and business ethics. I've sent the report to LOTTE ESG, like I mentioned earlier, and other relevant LOTTE parties, and requested they get back with me by April 6th. This is the report I wrote. It looks like a lot, but I gathered all the community responses and scanned through the ESG report. After that, it came together pretty quick. If you have some free time and some creativity, you could just as easily make something like this and hopefully explore new avenues for our community to combat these unwanted petrochemical plants. So what's next? Ms. Kimbrelle has some call to actions. I've got some less definitive call to actions. I'm still waiting on a response from LOTTE Chemical, as I mentioned, so I'm not organizing a wider campaign right now to contact them. But once I receive a response, I'll likely share it with the community. And if I don't receive a satisfactory response, I'm hoping to reach out to wider media. I've identified other potential St. Charles Plain Fuels customers, but I think it's best to hold off on contacting them until I determine something definitive about whether or not they would work with St. Charles Plain Fuels. Some of them have even stricter ESG goals than LOTTE, so that's very promising. So if you would like to contact LOTTE's ESG, even though, like I mentioned, I'm not organizing a wider effort right now, but if you have a story you want to share with them directly, you can email them at esg@lotte.net. And I also have resources available with specific quotes from their sustainability report, St. Charles Parish community testimony, and relevant page references that you're welcome to use in your communications. So this QR code, if you scan it, should bring you to all that information. And that's pretty much it. So I wanted to thank you all for inviting me to speak here. It's a beautiful church. Um, if you have questions, please reach out to me. My email's up there. I'll be sticking around, of course, to hear Tulane's excellent presentations. If you have if you live in a high traffic or high road traffic area or have a business, in a high road traffic area, we brought some signs. We only had a handful of them, so
We can order more though.
please take them, put them up in your yards, put them up in your businesses. I also brought some strawberries and some Tabasco plants that are going to be in the kitchen area after this, so I'd be happy to share. And my wife actually does some teaching in the parish at the library system. So if you have some teenagers or you yourself are an artist and you would like to take some free classes, she's our wonderful watercolor classes and other art classes are taught at the local libraries. So thank you. The two you person that be happy to answer them.
Any questions?
All right, thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having us, Kimbrelle. And thank you, Pastor, for hosting us. We're here at the request of Refined Community Empowerment and to give you all sort of a recap of the work that we did concerning St. Charles Clean Fuels over the last year, year and change, and give you a little update about some concerns that you all have raised about IMTT's outreach. And so I'm J.R. Greenwald. I'm a third-year law student, and unfortunately, this is my last semester in the clinic. I'll be graduating in May. But yeah, I've really enjoyed working on this case.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Sudar Henson. I am also a third-year law student at Tulane. I will also be graduating this May, but I have had the opportunity to work on this case and work with Ms. Kimbrelle since last January, and it's been an honor. So we're really happy to be here. Hi, I'm Alejandra Rodriguez. I am a 2L law student, and this is my first semester on the case, and I'm going to be on it for the remainder of my career in law school. So I'm really excited to be getting to know the community and working with y'all. Okay, so just before we start and as we get going, we do have a set of slides, but we want this to be conversational. We want to hear from you as you go. We've met a lot of you before, and it's just so good to be back. And so please do let us know if you have like any questions or comments as we're talking, and we'd be more than glad to do that as we go. Okay, so I'm going to start us off by talking about the St. Charles Clean Fuels proposed blue ammonia facility here in St. Rose. The Environmental Law Clinic has submitted a variety of public comments on the different environmental permits that this facility would need to operate. We have also spoken at different public hearings on this facility as well. We have had a variety of clients join us on some or all of these public comments. And so those include, of course, Refined Community Empowerment, Anorna Johnson, Concerned Citizens of St. John, Rice St. James, Green Army, Healthy Gulf, Sierra Club, the Descendants Project, and the Louisiana Fair Housing Action Center. Okay, so as we talk about this facility, we really wanted to go ahead and establish kind of the lay of the land like that we're talking about here. So this marker right here in red, of course, is IMTT. Immediately and just directly adjacent to the right of that is St. Rose and historic Elkinsville. And so what we have highlighted here in red is where they are like roughly proposing to build like this proposed blue ammonia facility, though stopping just short of Highway 310 there. Okay, so what on earth even is a blue ammonia facility in the first place? So this would be a chemical plant. Ammonia would be the product. Ammonia, it's used for fertilizers and hydrogen fuel. Blue, the blue part of the blue ammonia facility, so that refers to the use of fossil fuel feedstock. So what would run this facility would be a fossil fuel feedstock. That's usually natural gas. But it would also have carbon capture and storage or CCS technology. And so what that means is that the carbon dioxide, the CO2 that this facility would emit would be captured, compressed, and then shipped via pipeline to be stored in a well underground. There are also other types of ammonia. So, for example, you could have something called gray ammonia, which is very similar in that fossil fuel, usually natural gas, would be the feedstock. It would be the thing that helps power and run this facility. But if it's gray ammonia, it doesn't have any of the attached CCS technology. There's also something called green ammonia, which is where renewable energy would power the facility, and that does not require CCS or carbon capture technology. This is also a very new technology. There are a lot of blue facilities and blue ammonia facilities specifically like proposed in this part of Louisiana specifically. Okay, so we're going to touch both on like human health and environmental impacts. As far as air impacts go, this permit for this facility would allow the emission of 59 tons of ammonia per year, which would make this like a major source of ammonia. As far as wetlands impacts goes, the design and construction of this facility would require like the filling and or construction on 180 plus, just above that amount, acres of wetlands, which pertains to stormwater, floodwater, drainage impacts. We wanted to touch a little bit on ammonia risks as well. So ammonia is a toxic, flammable gas. It can be explosive when it's mixed with air. It can have a strong, unpleasant odor, kind of like urine or rotten fish. High levels of ammonia can cause immediate severe lung damage. Long-term exposure to low levels can cause breathing problems over time. Some other concerns, like with the St. Charles Clean Fuels facility being located in St. Rose specifically, one is proximity to homes. Like we were just looking at that map a few slides back. This facility would be located like less than a half-mile away. Another like existing concern is the existing pollution that a lot of you are already experiencing from IMTT. Elkinsville is already in the top 5% in Louisiana and nationwide for respiratory risk from pollution, according to EPA data from 2024. Ammonia releases, what we were just talking about, like the risk of ammonia, and then the risk of a CO2 pipeline rupture too. So these were each issues that we considered and spoke to in our public comments about this facility.
Okay, so to recap, and a lot of this has been said by Joseph already and Kimbrelle, but St. Charles Clean Fuels needs these 3 permits before it can begin operating and before it can even start construction. It needs these 3 permits. The coastal use permit cut from the Louisiana Department of Energy and Natural Resources, the clean water, slow down. It needs the coastal use permit because the site of proposed facilities in Louisiana's coastal zone, and it needs a Clean Water Act Section 404 permit from the Army Corps, and needs this permit because it would be developing in wetlands that are covered under the Clean Water Act, and they need an air permit from the Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality, or LDEQ. Because they would be a source of significant commissions of glues that are regulated under the Clean Air Act. Okay, so over the last year, we had submitted written comments to all 3 of these agencies on each of these permits. And just to give you a sort of a high-level overview of the arguments that we raised in those comments, and the arguments that we raised in the to LDNR for the coastal use permit and to the Army Corps are very similar, because both of those agencies have to sort of assess the wetlands impact of the facility. So big concerns we cited there were, like Sidra was saying, storm and floodwater management. The site contains over 180 acres of wetlands that would be dredged and filled. So we were, of course, concerned with how that would impact storm and floodwater management in St. Rose. And since it is a lot of wetlands on the site, we're also concerned, with the shifting soils, how that might impact their infrastructure, both above ground and underground. We'd be worried about putting a CO2 pipeline in ground that could shift. And then regarding the air permit, our biggest concern was that St. Charles Clean Fuels applied as a minor source of air emissions, and we had a lot of reasons to believe. Well, we had an air expert review the permit, and in his opinion, St. Charles Clean Fuels didn't calculate their potential emissions correctly, and the errors they made, if they accounted for all their emissions correctly, they should probably have applied as a major source of air emissions. And major sources of emissions under the Clean Air Act are subject to a lot stricter requirements than minor sources. And then, of course, we're of course concerned with the impact to you all from the ammonia emissions that would be coming from St. Charles Clean Fuels. And we also had, as I'm sure you remember, a few public hearings last semester, or last fall, I should say. In August, we had the coastal use permit hearing before LDEQ. And then in September, we tried to have the air permit hearing before LDEQ. Of course, you remember how that went. That was postponed and then rescheduled to December. And I think it's important to emphasize just getting the agencies to grant these hearings in the first place was a really huge victory, and really is a testament to how well you all have done, how well Kimbrelle has done, relative to the community. And you all have done a great job coming together and showing these agencies that there's a lot of public interest in this facility. A lot that you all are very concerned that these agencies have a lot of reason to be concerned with these permit applications. And so, just, getting the hearing in the first place is a really big win. And to give an example, Lisa Jordan, our clinic director, she can't remember another time in her about 20 years with the clinic that LDNR has granted a hearing for a coastal use permit. So that's really incredible to be able to get a hearing for this permit. And then with the air permit, with the media attention that garnered, and that's usually great for protecting or promoting the community's interests, because it keeps pressure on both the agency and the applicant to make sure that they're doing everything that they need to be doing. And this media attention also led to the basis of the recusal motion that we filed last semester. And as Kimbrelle alluded to, after the hearing, it was postponed in September. LDEQ gave a statement to some reporters saying that, what happened at the hearing was an organized attempt to hinder economic growth in St. Rose. We thought that kind of showed that they were biased in these permit proceedings, so we filed a recusal motion. We are still waiting to hear back from LDEQ. They have not made a decision one way or another on this motion. But, of course, if they do grant the hearing without making a decision on the motion, this recusal issue is something that could be raised in later judicial proceedings on the permit if Refined Community Empowerment decided to take that route. And then in that case, a judge would need to decide whether there were grounds for refusal. So where are we now? We're still waiting. None of these three agencies have made any decision one way or the other on these permits. But of course, as soon as we know, you will know. And we will let you know as soon as any decision is made on these permits. And Again, if even one of these permits is rejected, they will not be able to operate or begin construction on this facility. And if, on the other hand, the permits are approved, that will, we'll have to sit down and discuss our next steps with Kimbrelle and Provide Community Empowerment and their number pass folder. But I think it's important to emphasize that just if they grant the permits, that's not the end of it. There are steps that can be taken after that. Yeah, and in the meantime, while we're waiting for the agencies to make a decision on these permits, you all have raised voice concerns both to us and to LDEQ about activity going on next door at IMTT. And so we have been seeing how we can address your concerns. And these are some of the concerns that we've heard from you all. You raised concerns about your tank construction at IMTT. You reported feeling shaking in your homes. Hearing construction noises, seeing construction equipment. You've also raised concerns about possible activity within the 2,000-foot buffer zone between your residences and IMTT. So some of you all have raised those concerns to LDEQ, which is great. Sidra and Alejandra will talk more later in our presentation about how important it is to raise those concerns to the agency, to put those in writing, put those before LDEQ. LDEQ investigated one of these complaints and they raised concerns about some possible construction going on at IMTT. And in the course of their investigation, they spoke with representative from IMTT and from St. Charles Parish. And they posted this response on EDMS, which is LDEQ's electronic document managing system. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later too, but that's where you can find any updates on any permitting proceedings. That's where you make reports to LDEQ. And in their report on this complaint, LDEQ talked to IMTT, and IMTT said the construction equipment that was there was used for maintenance and repairs on 2 existing tanks at IMTT. It was not for new tank construction. IMTT said in their report that there actually hasn't been any new tank construction at the St. Rose facility since 2012. Now, LDEQ also talked to representatives from St. Charles Parish, and AIR said that it's likely that most of the existing infrastructure at IMTT is grandfathered into local zoning laws, including the 2,000-foot buffer requirement. So that means, of course, for BO, there you can see there's a lot of construction within that 2,000-foot buffer zone. That construction occurred before these zoning requirements became effective. However, Parish also said they told LDEQ that any new major construction or any significant modifications to any infrastructure at IMTT would have to comply with these zoning requirements, including the buffer requirement, unless the parish granted it accepts.
And I think that's perhaps now Cidra's pick back up.
Okie doke. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talking about something else going on at IMTT. So IMTT has applied for, which is currently pending before LDEQ, a Title V permit renewal and revision application. And so just to start out, what is Title V? This is a permit program under the Clean Air Act that regulates air pollutants for facilities like IMTT, which are major sources. What's a major source? It's a source that emits more than a certain level of air pollutants a year. That level is 100 tons a year. And so they are required, if you have a Title V permit, you are required to renew that every 5 years. And so that's what this current IMTT Title V application is that's pending right now. For a renewal of the Title V permit, a public notice and comment period is necessary for them to hold. It has not been posted yet. And we will keep you posted on when notice is issued so people can submit public comment. Okay. How do I look at this application? There's a few different ways to do it. We have provided like this link here, this first bullet point. That's just a link that just goes directly to that application. JR mentioned the EDMS website that is like run through LDEQ. That is like their website, like where they store documents. You can also search it up just on like EDMS, DEQ, Louisiana.gov in general. And if you do that, the AI number for IMTT is 4885, and the document ID for this specific Title V renewal and revision application is 14224-160. But we did also provide that direct link, which I'm now going to try to navigate to, and I'm not going to break. Okay, perfect. Okay, so this is what it looks like. We just wanted to look super quickly at one of the pages of this. So if you just look at this permit and you go to page 8, you're gonna see this header here, proposed project emissions. So this is what IMTT is like proposing to admit, like from this facility, continue to admit in its Title V renewal and revision application. And so if you like scroll down here, you can see different pollutants listed here and then different amounts. What we do want to say though is that yes, like you can look here and see like this is what they are proposing to emit. And we really wanted to show you this so that you know where to find it, so that it's like a tool in your toolkit, right? But you don't need it to make a good public comment. You know, your lived experiences, like your experiences like with IMTT, are the most important thing. And it's really important to speak to them. And we're going to speak a little bit more to that in a bit.
Oh yeah, do they end on ammonia? Like, yeah, are the levels of on ammonia emissions going to increase based on this permit? Because they're building 4 new tanks, right? And that's going to be an IMTT site to store from St. Charles Clean Fuels. So does this Title V show that increase in ammonia emissions?
It's yes.
Okay.
Does.
How bad does it look?
I think it's about 27 tons per year, if you have enough.
That's right. It's not a huge amount. Most of it, because the ammonia tanks are there, the ammonia emissions, and Kim, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the kinds of emissions associated with the ammonia tanks are mostly fugitive, or most of the ammonia emissions associated with this build out of the St. Charles Clean Fuels facility are going to be in the St. Charles Clean Fuels permit.
Awesome.
And a smaller portion of them are captured in this IMTT permit renewal because they're going to be housing the 4 ammonia storage tanks for St. Charles Clean Fuels.
But they should have been considered up to yet.
Yes, and that is so as my colleague Kim Terrell, who will speak shortly, said they should have been considered altogether. That was one of our main arguments in our air permit comment, that it was improperly separated apart, and that really DEQ needs to look at this all as one big unit.
So you're doing the same thing with the Cornerstone facility in Jefferson too, right? Where it's all on the same property, but because it's different companies operating it, they're considering them the separate polluters, right?
Right. Yeah. And these are issues, they're called common control issues, and the students did a lot of fantastic research on this last semester and made some strong arguments. And we're happy to share any of those comments with y'all if you want to take a close look at them as well on that issue.
Y'all were talking about how our lived experiences are valid for reporting. If you live in Destrehan, you kind of caught between 2 awful places. So how would we go about reporting something like that?
So I can make a suggestion. Like health effects are a really important thing to report, right? So if you experience coughing or shortness of breath, burning eye irritation, that's super important. And the thing is, especially when you have 2 communities opposite sides of the river saying the same thing, and you have wind direction information. So like where I live, if I'm experiencing a toxic odor, I Google wind direction on my phone, or I look at flags and I try to get a sense of where the wind is coming from. And when I make my report, I say, hey, it smells chemically, or it smells like asphalt, or it smells like ammonia. It's burning my nose. The wind is coming from the south. It gets stronger as I walk towards the facility or as I drive towards the facility, because you would not believe the things that DEQ will try to attribute.
We might. We try reporting Norco pretty frequently.
But that's a great.
Thank you.
Okay, so one last thing about that. If you do choose to, like what we just did was go through the direct link. However, if you choose to just go on the EDMS website at LDEQ and look up this permit with the AI number and the document ID, this is what it's going to look like. And so what we have highlighted here in yellow is the doc ID. Right next to it is the AI number for IMTT. So if you search it that way, that's what it would look like.
So, hey, everybody. I think I've met many of you before. I'm Kim Terrell, a staff scientist at Tulane Environmental Law Clinic. I'm not an attorney, but I'm here to science it up a little bit. Miss Kimbrelle had asked me to speak briefly about the air monitor that IMTT is proposing to put on this community. So she sent me a flyer that was distributed that calls this an EPA-approved monitor. I don't know what they mean by EPA-approved. What I can tell you is it is not a gold standard monitor, and it would be more accurately described as a sensor. So when I say air monitor, that implies a certain level of reliability. And when I say sensor, that implies something that's lower cost, that doesn't give you as reliable data. So EPA calls this a low-cost sensor, this particular technology that IMTT is proposing to put in. It doesn't provide data that can tell you if air quality is within legal limits. The numbers that it's going to produce are not reliable enough to make that determination. So if it were my community, my question would be, well, what are you going to do if it reads high? What are you going to, if it reads low, I know you're going to tell me there's no problem. If it reads high, what are you going to do? Are you going to say, well, it's not reliable enough to be trusted and move on and check that box? And the thing that is really egregious that they left out is that EPA has evaluated this low-cost sensor. So it's called a AQ mesh sensor is like the name of the technology. And so EPA has evaluated a lot of different low-cost sensors, and they give them what you can think of as like a reliability grade. So if there's any scientists in the room, that's technically an R-squared value. It tells you how well the numbers from the low-cost sensor match up with numbers from a gold standard air monitor if you operated them side by side. And so they do that for each pollutant that the monitor would measure. And so EPA has only evaluated reliability for 2 of the pollutants that would be measured by this low-cost sensor, ozone and nitrogen dioxide. And so the reliability grade for ozone was a 45%. The reliability grade for nitrogen dioxide was a 32%. Now, I know a school teacher who probably would not be very happy if her students were getting grades below 50%, right? We would call that failing. And so I hear people oftentimes say, well, some data is better than no data. Some information is better than no information. And I disagree with that, because if the information you're getting isn't reliable, it could give you a false sense of security. So I wanted to make that clear, and you don't have to take my word for it. If you do a Google search for EPA low-cost sensor evaluation, you can find a table with a list of all the different sensors, and you're looking for the one that says AQ mesh. And you'll see a column that says R squared, and a value of 0.45 and another value of 0.32. The values 45%. Exactly, yeah, which is a failing grade in any classroom. So I want to just very briefly talk about IMTT's pending permit application. So it would largely maintain the status quo, and it sounds like the status quo is a problem for many people in this room. And it would also allow the construction of 4 new tanks and result in some additional pollution being released. Um, and it's important to understand that IMTT emits a very complex set of pollution. So, based on their own reporting, they tell DEQ that they emit 40 different toxic pollutants each year. And keep in mind, they're emitting different amounts of each of those, and each of those pollutants has a different toxicity level, right? So, PAHs are more toxic than benzene, and benzene is more toxic than ammonia. And IMTT has never been required to evaluate the overall toxicity of everything that they emit. So the way that DEQ regulates air pollution is they assume that people breathe one chemical at a time. And I mean, I like to rag on DEQ, but that's also how the EPA and this country in general regulates air pollution. And so what I really want to emphasize is that just because something's legal doesn't mean it's safe. Right? So if IMTT and St. Charles Clean Fuels are telling you we are complying with all the requirements, we are doing everything we are legally required to do, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's safe to live next to those facilities. And they haven't even evaluated the risk from 2 pollutants, any 2 pollutants, right? So when they do, the last time they really dug into how much pollution they think is in the air in St. Rose was back in 2010, when IMTT had to do something called air dispersion modeling. And that's a fancy way for saying, we're going to take how much they say they release, we're going to look at all the other facilities around, and we're going to predict how much pollution we think is in the air in St. Rose. And again, we're doing this all on paper with math, right? Like we're not actually measuring what's in the air. And so IMTT predicted that levels of a particular pollutant called hexane were 3.5% below the legal limit. And you should know that the legal limit in Louisiana has not been updated since 1992. And if anybody remembers what telephones and computers looked like in 1992, you know that science and technology has come a long way. We have a much better understanding of toxicity today than we did, 30, 40 years ago. IMTT also hasn't accounted for the fact that they've increased their emission of that chemical since they did that mining. So in 2010, they said, hey, based on how much hexane is being produced right now, we think there's about 4,000 micrograms per cubic meter in the air. Well, now we've increased it. They should re-examine that math. And the reason why it's so important to report health effects is the health effects of all of these chemicals are known. So if you are in a community and you are saying, hey, I'm having trouble breathing, and there's evidence that levels of a certain chemical that causes breathing problem might be above the legal limit, that information taken together, I think, can be really powerful. I also want to point out, and since we have, I don't know if it's West Bank or East Bank, because I'm in New Orleans, but across the river, I think we have residents from across the river here today, which I think is where Bungie is. Oh, Bungie is the East Bank. Okay, and we also have there's I think it's a pesticide plant across the river. I'm forgetting the name of it. Bayer, yeah. But there's multiple sources of some of these pollutants in the area. And so Bungie has dramatically increased its hexane emissions in the last several years. They emit a lot more than IMTT does, but they're also farther from Elkinsville. So that's why air modeling is so important, right? Because you might have a really big source far away, you might have a smaller source that's right next door. And the point is that you have to look at all of that and evaluate what that's going to mean for air quality in a neighborhood. There's also several other pollutants that are close to the legal limits based on that 2010 modeling. For example, naphthalene, methanol, and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which are also called PAHs. Um, so I had looked at the overall risk from the level of pollution that IMTT predicted back in 2010. And they didn't do this for all of their pollutants. They only did it for 5 of them. But I said, okay, if we take the levels that they predicted of all 5 of those chemicals and add them together, what does that mean for health risks? So if you do that, it turns out that the overall cancer risk from those pollutants is much higher than what DEQ says is acceptable. And keep in mind that Louisiana never has like the top standards for health or pollution, right? So if something is unacceptable by Louisiana standards, there's cause for concern. And this is again because I tend to be a little sciencey and technical, but this is kind of a qualitative version of that risk assessment or that risk analysis that I did. And I'm happy to send more detailed information to anybody. But the idea is that I considered levels of these 5 pollutants. The concentration that IMTT predicted was very low for some of them, very high for others. And then I accounted for the toxicity as estimated by EPA. So, for example, the chemical that caused the biggest risk was naphthalene, which is not as toxic as some of the other chemicals, but there's so much of it emitted that it was like the number 1 priority pollutant. And this is the kind of analysis that should be done to inform air monitoring, right? So ideally, you would say, okay, this is the chemical that's responsible for the most risk. We need to make sure we're measuring that in the air, as opposed to, hey, we went out and bought a cheap sensor and this is what it measures and this is what you're getting. So with that, I want to hand it back to the students to just wrap this up. Y'all have been very attentive and patient, and I promise we're close to the end.
Thank you so much, Kim.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to close by talking a little bit more about reporting issues to LDEQ and the public trust doing. So just like finding that application earlier, there's a few different ways to do this. If you want to report an issue to LDEQ, you can Google LDEQ citizen complaint and it will get you where you need to go. You can also go directly on LDEQ's website. And I'm going to do it right now. I'm also not going to break the presentation. Okay, so this is the deq.louisiana.gov homepage. If you go to this little bit here at the top about LDEQ, and wait patiently for it to load. Okay, it might not play nice. But if you like go through that tab, so LDEQ homepage, you click on that tab I was indicating to about LDEQ. If you look then on the page it takes you to on the left-hand side, there's going to be like a toolbar. If you scroll to the bottom of that, you're going to see the words online incident reporting. And then you'll like see the words like file a complaint, report an incident. If you click through all of that, it's going to take you to the forms to submit a complaint to LDEQ to report issues to LDEQ online. That's one way to do it. You can also call them on the phone. The hotline for reporting issues to LDEQ is 225-342-1234. And so, reporting issues to LDEQ is incredibly important. A lot of you have already been doing this, and we wanted to touch on a little bit like why this matters so much. It's important because even if it seems like the responses that you're, getting are not what you're looking for or like addressing what you're concerned about, what reporting does, it helps build a public record of both IMTT's effects on the community and it documents LDEQ's knowledge and response to that. Which leads us to. Hi, everyone. This leads us to public trust. So, what is public trust duty? So, this is a constitutional obligation that DEQ must consider whenever they are taking an action that is going to impact the environment in any way. And this is rooted in the Louisiana state constitution. We have used this before whenever we wrote comments for St. Charles Clean Fuels. So, yeah, these are the 5 questions that LDEQ is required to consider. And so those are, has the facility avoided adverse environmental impacts to the maximum extent possible? Do social and economic benefits outweigh environmental costs? Are there alternative projects that would harm the environment less? Are there alternative sites that would harm the environment less? And are there mitigating measures to protect the environment? Why does public trust matter? So we need your firsthand experience. As I said before, it is LDEQ's constitutional duty in order to act on these 5 factors. And firsthand experience is going to be what's most important here. This is because LDEQ has to consider the cost and benefits whenever they are looking into allowing the permits. And so y'all's impact, what it has on the community counts as a cost in the cost benefit analysis. So we want to hear what your costs are, what your benefits are, in order to most accurately tell LDEQ what their concerns are. And they have to consider those costs whenever they go through the cost benefit analysis. Also, just wanted to reiterate that this is an open dialogue, and whenever anybody wants to jump in, please feel free to say anything. Yeah.
Does this sort of obligation also extend to like local government in regards to weighing the costs and benefits in human lives?
Does the public trust duty extend to local?
Or something similar to this, like with zoning, for example?
Right. So that's actually no, the short answer is not no, likely no. The public trust duty, there's judicial precedent saying that the public trust duty definitely applies to LDEQ and to LDENR. And that's because they are they're state agencies acting on behalf of the state. There's actually a statutory hook also for LDEQ having to comply with the public trust duty in certain permit actions. But yeah, for local bodies, I mean, I think there are legal arguments to be made, but those are supported by Louisiana jurisprudence. So I'm sure that the short answer.
Not an avenue to explore, no.
Right, but a lot of local municipalities have ordinances that mirror the public trust factors. So, for instance, local land use ordinances and other things like that do require cost-benefit analysis. And if there's a federal hook, then there's other provisions under federal regulations that require local actors to consider those factors as well. But when it comes to the public trust duty, really, we're talking right now DEQ and DENR.
Gotta jiggle all those doorknobs,
And so why it's important to submit public comments. As Sidra was talking about before, it is super important to build a public record. So y'all's public comments that you have addressed before, this was for St. Charles Clean Fuel and not for IMTT. So we really want to make sure that we're getting these public comments specifically for IMTT. And so as Sidra was saying before, it's really important to record your responses from LDEQ because even if a permit is granted despite those public comments, these are going to be recorded and they're going to be put into public records. So if there is a lawsuit in the future, y'all's comments are going to be put in. So it's just really important to have that as recorded evidence. And so, yeah, this is going to increase chances of success for participating in a lot of different public comment opportunities. Y'all have done amazing so far. I know, as JR talked about before, like y'all worked with LDENR for the hearing on the coastal use permit, which is just so rare. That is incredible. So y'all's efforts have y'all been doing so good. And so yeah, I just really want to thank everyone that has wrote public comments before too. It's really gonna help us. Um, and also, yeah, y'all's community interest and concern was able to get LDEQ to reschedule the permit hearing for the air permit to a much larger facility. So yeah, it's been incredible and a lot of hard work. So appreciate that.
Clap.
Okay, so what y'all should be commenting on, kind of like Kim was saying before, anything that affects y'all, like in terms of like, if y'all have any eye irritation or breathing problems, like things like that are very important for us to know. Um, and we really want to make sure that like y'all's voices are heard because at the end of the day, y'all are the experts living here and knowing how this is impacting your community. So we really want to make sure like y'all's voices and stories are heard. That's how the facility impacts you and what the costs are for having IMTT here. Um, and community power, it generates media attention, and that's going to help add pressure, as we said before. And so I just want to remind y'all that LDEQ, if y'all have complained before, tell them again. Like if LDEQ hasn't responded to those community with complaints, it's important to always just remind them, let them know what they're doing wrong. If IMTT has not been holding community meetings, for example, you can record that and let them know. And I think it's especially important to record any of the short-term and long-term responses that LDEQ has been giving you to be recorded. And just letting them know, even if they have had community hearings, if it has been unsatisfactory in any way, really important to let us know. Like the more information we have, the better. I think that's the best way we go about it.
I just got a response back from a complaint that I made in September, so it could take them a little while to get back to you. But yeah, just keep reaching out if you have problems, I think.
Yeah. No, exactly. So even if it takes time,
Who did you complain about? Was it IUTT or
No, I believe it was IMTT. I forget what facility it was. Again, it was 6 months ago.
Then somebody in Norco.
I think probably.
okay, so up here we have some examples of things that y'all can comment about. And we know that, the community is what's most knowledgeable about these issues. I know there's a lot of knowledge in this room, especially about the history of Elkinsville and its amazing history and overcoming struggles, especially as a free town. So I want to make sure that, we know that and we're able to use that. And so I also, something that uh, I'm sure y'all remember as well is the IMTT fire, the sink fire. And so that's something that, we need to remind them that IMTT has a track record for being unsafe. And we want to, yeah, we want to make sure that that is definitely emphasized and letting them know, what they need to do. Um, the most important thing is that y'all's voices are at the forefront of this and letting y'all's stories be told in this way. So I really want to make sure that, and so these are examples of things we can talk about. So. Right. And now we're done with presentation. Any questions, answers, what are y'all's concerned?
So, is there a generality as far as the AQ sensor on the liability grades, the air exposure model, and the legal limit not being quite updated since the 90s? When do we start questioning like greenwashing or false reporting by INTT? Because that could delay processes essentially.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll repeat it so everyone could hear. I think the question was, kind of like when is it appropriate to accuse IMCC of greenwashing given the focus on subpar air monitoring and everything else that's been going on? I think that's a question of strategy, and that's a question that y'all, are best positioned to answer.
Can you repeat his question?
His question was, at what point is it appropriate? And please, if I'm misphrasing this, but I think I hear, at what point is it appropriate to say that IMTT is greenwashing? For those who don't know, greenwashing is an expression where, like, oh, you're pretending to care about the environment, right? Like you're pretending to be green and you're doing this for a self-serving cause, right? So in this case, I think it's a fair argument that you're pursuing this air monitoring more for public relations than to get an understanding of whether the air is safe to breathe. Um, I mean, I think in terms of science, you are on solid ground to say, hey, this is not a effective or reliable way to tell me if air in my community is safe to breathe. And again, I think in terms of strategy, that's something, that's y'all's wheelhouse.
I'll get on me. Okay.
Yeah, in other words, and I just made aware of this past Sunday morning about IMTT's interest in being a good neighbor with this monitor. And when I look at what it's monitoring, it's nothing. It's greenwashing. They're just trying to they're only doing this to say that we have a monitor there, but we want to monitor that. We want to monitor the things that are going to hurt us. And like with all these the chemicals, the benzenes and the naphthalenes and the formaldehydes and stuff, this little monitor, this is not monitoring that. And so, and I'm saying that because they asking Mount Zion for permission to put the monitors on the grounds here and in I think 3 other areas. But these monitors it's a joke.
Yeah, I hear you, and I think again, I'm not here to dictate strategy, but I can also relate a little bit as somebody who is advocating for air monitoring in her community and played this game. If it were me, I would probably say, I give you permission to monitor formaldehyde. I give you permission to monitor benzene. I give you permission to monitor naphthalene. You have permission to monitor all those things specifically. And if they try to tell you, oh, yeah, we're going to measure that because we're measuring total VOCs, not the same thing, right? So total VOCs is kind of like saying how much total pollution, but it doesn't tell you which specific things that are the most toxic out here. Yes, sir.
So we've already had the hearings. It seemed like that would have been the proper forum to wage those concerns. So now, what would be the appropriate forum to wage concern as to what are we monitoring? What kind of technology are we using to monitor? So, where that leaves us in the balance.
That's a great question. So for anyone who couldn't hear, the question was, what is the appropriate forum to raise these concerns about inadequate monitoring since so many public hearings have already happened? I think the key here is that IMTT is doing something that they are not required to do, and they're doing it courtly. So there's no formal public hearing about this monitoring because it's not something that's required, right? It's something that's being done sort for public relation. So I think again that comes back to y'all strategizing and figuring out like what's the best way to go about disseminating this information. We also, the law clinic, every year we comment on every year we have commented on DEQ's annual monitoring plan. And last year we did that and we included St. Rose and we said DEQ should be doing comprehensive air monitoring in St. Rose, not just bringing back the monitor that was there, but bringing back a better version of it. So we will I can't say for sure, I would imagine we will submit those comments again this year, but that doesn't really address the IMTT low-cost sensor because, again, that's something that they're not required to do, so there's not like a formal review process for that.
Throwing this to the law students, would this possibly be a grounds for a lawsuit in terms of strategy?
Well, I just want to jump in and just supplement Kim's answer first and then take your second question. So,
one of the things the students flagged is that there is a pending air permit renewal application that will have a public notice and comment period. So pretty soon there will be another opportunity for y'all to make a comment about IMTT in particular to LDEQ, and we'll let y'all know when that period is live. And second, until St. Charles, less than until St. Charles, hopefully they do not get granted, but until something happens on those St. Charles Clean Fuels permits, you can still send in information to LDEQ, to LDNR, and to the Army Corps about each of those permits. So that's totally fair game. It's not technically during the notice and comment period. Sometimes the agencies say they don't have to consider that information in the same way, but it builds the record as part of that permit decision. On the question of whether or not something related to the air monitoring would be grounds for a lawsuit, that would be so anytime there's a permit decision, that is a final action taken by a public body that can be assessed for whether or not there's possible grounds for a lawsuit. There's also other environmental statutes and other ways that lawsuits can be brought, but of course those are outside of the permitting process and require separate findings of violations of the federal or state statute. And so I'll say that I think that as it relates to the permits, you really need a final decision before you can decide whether or not you're going to bring a lawsuit on those. But just an individual violation of the air statute separate from a permit process is a different kind of legal consideration that would have to.
Will I add one thing? Can I use the microphone?
I do.
Goodbye.
We have two situations here. We have the proposed ammonia facility, but we have the operating IMTT facility. And as a result of the community getting involved, the agency is requiring when a community member complains about an odor, the agency requires IMTT to tell them what chemical they were moving from a storage tank or into a vessel or whatever. So we know now more about what chemicals moved and caused health impacts as a result of IMTT moving chemicals. Then you look at what blue ammonia is proposing, and that adds a whole host. So we worked with one of the community members who gets so sick at night, she has to leave her home. So I got her Suma canisters from Pace Analytical by the airport and taught her how to take an air sample. And before she leaves her house, she opens the valve, it sucks in the sample, she closes the valve, and she runs out of her house. We had meetings with Dr. Nance, who was head of EPA in Dallas until the new president took over. And we were meeting with her on a totally different topic for about 4 hours. And then after that ran down, I told her about this woman having to get the Suma canister to figure out what chemical she was breathing that was making her sick. And she said no one should ever have to leave their home because an industry is forcing them out of their home. So some of y'all have been the ones that have called in complaints and required the company to tell them what chemical they were moving around or releasing. And then at the beginning, y'all showed some pictures of the fire. And there were people that were injured in the fire. And so, I mean, the blue ammonia is a really big deal. But the operating IMTT is a huge deal that's here in your community every day, every night, and is poisoning you. And then what we're going to have added to that is the blue ammonia adding more poisoning to your air. So please don't just focus on the blue ammonia. Focus on what's really going on And because y'all have turned in these complaints, the agency's making the IMTTs say what chemicals they were releasing. So all of us have much more data available than we did when we started this a year and a half or 2 years ago. So there's a lot to work with, and I understand some of them want to do a court case. All of that is possible, but it's only possible because we know so much more now, and it's possible because y'all have done the work, turning in the complaints and getting a report on what chemicals, and we know what chemicals cause which health impacts, and now we can correlate it to what you were breathing, what you were breathing, what you were breathing, and these are the health impacts. So thank everyone for all the hard work that is going into this day.
Yeah.
See, and I as quickly wanting to add one more thing on the gentleman's point. So our clinic practices a certain type of law. We focus on permitting. That's why Yahali here is talking about permits. There are certainly other types of attorneys out there. And I don't want to put you all on the spot, but Concerned Citizens of St. John, I think, has probably the most experience in this room pursuing different types of lawsuits. So they may be worth talking with more. Also, I'll say that Mr. Coco kind of brought a new angle as well, right? Like putting pressure on the companies, customers, and just taking a whole other strategy, right? So to me, that's something where IMTT's, over promising and under delivering on the air monitoring could be relevant to that kind of pressure at that location. Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to comment on what you said. You talked about the impact that IMTT currently has right now in this area. Okay. And then what potentially could happen with blue ammonia. And I live across the river, and there are already people complaining about IMTT in St. Rose. But what you didn't mention is that there's also a proposed IMTT plant that they're going to build on the opposite side of the river, right across the river in Lulu.
It just got tabled indefinitely. That doesn't mean they're not. The rezoning got tabled. It doesn't mean it's off the table completely.
If you're getting it from this right now, you can enjoy the thought of getting it also from across the river when they build it in Luling. So, I mean, whatever.
I think what she's saying is St. Charles Parish needs to really pull together on this.
Right, because we're all getting the same water. We're all getting the same air. We're all suffering from the same effects. So we need to, and Luling is kind of like, well, I'm assuming this, I haven't heard anybody say this, but it's like, well, that's really not my problem. But it is your problem. Because you're getting that
They've summit and ruling.
I live in an area where my house is the only house with a say no to IMTT sign, and people pass it by and they kind of like, what's that all about? Soon to have a blue ammonia sign in my yard, because it does impact all of us. And it impacts Jefferson Parish, and it impacts Orleans Parish. And everybody that drinks the same water and bathes in the same water or waters their garden with the same water.
And I think that's actually one of the big problems in our parish is we have a really hard time getting information about things like tonight out to the public. Like, I wanted to share your post, but my husband talked me out of it just because he thought you already had bigger reach than I did. But I should have shared it anyway, because I live in Destrehan and we got neighbors asking us for the say no to blue ammonia signs. I should have done it. And in the future, if you're good with it, I will always share y'all's posts to make sure that people see it. I didn't want to step on your toes.
Yeah, Lisa, we posted at St. Charles, talking all of those different places for St. Charles Parish. And we have people here from the Baton Rouge area. We have people here from St. John Parish. Definitely in our parish, in St. Charles Parish. But I learned today that the chemicals that Mr. Bobby and Tish are fighting, and these St. John Parish people are fighting, that it's reaching that chloroprene.
Yeah.
It's going all the way to Kenner.
Yeah. Yep, I believe it.
It goes all the way to Kenner. So we're not just getting the chemicals from IMTT. You mentioned Bungie right here. We have St. Charles further down, 2 grain elevators. They have one right across the river in Amok, another grain elevator. So I was surprised that you said hexane comes from Bungie as well. Like that's really scary.
And then we have Taft too. You can't even go to Taft. I can't even go to Taft without getting a migraine. That's where my papa's buried. I can't even go to the cemetery without getting sick.
Is that where Dow is?
Yes. And all the
And Dow.
all this other chemical.
I was sick.
Yeah. And you can smell it, no problem.
I was sick. So our problem is not just St. Charles Parish.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not our problem is not just St. Rose. You know, now this is a God thing. I just have to say that. We're in church. I can say that this is a public, this is a church. Yes, this is a God thing. Because look at how he's orchestrating everything. The way that I came about this, getting this information, I didn't go out to find this information. This information actually came to me through a network of friends that was built. So this is an us problem. And nothing's going to be done unless we start talking. We're not big on talking, y'all. I mean, in terms of what we're dealing with and IMTT and what we've been dealing with for years, I understand who we are as a people. And I'm talking about Elkinsville, Freetown. I'm talking about Preston Hollow. We've smelled these chemicals for decades. And we know that our people have worked there, retired from there, and Bungie and all of these other industries. But they're killing us. So we're not saying go away. We're saying keep your chemicals in your plants and in your tanks and in your pipes. Yep. We're saying don't expand because we're overwhelmed right now. We're saying don't bring the nasty friends.
No, yes, ma'am. No matter how many ball fields you can build with the money you get from them for the parish.
Absolutely.
I'm so tired of that.
Absolutely. So they want to placate us, but we have to say enough is enough. It's not until we start working as a system. Yep. You're working against systems. Yep. You see. So Mr. Bobby in St. John the Baptist Parish, you'll see him all over YouTube because he's been advocating for himself, for his family, and for his community. Miss Shirley Levine, she's been in St. James. A lot of people, sorry y'all. A lot of people say, oh, I didn't realize we lived in Cancer Alley. I didn't either. They said, I thought it was just St. James Parish was Cancer Alley. No. Between Baton Rouge and New Orleans is considered Cancer Alley here. And those chemicals that we were talking about, they cause all kinds of horrible sicknesses and deaths. Mr. J. Smith was here at our last meeting, February 18th. He couldn't come today because he's suffering with bronchitis. Andrea is our cousin who's been at most of our meetings and helping us to canvass. She's suffering with bronchitis. And a lot of that is because of these chemicals that we're breathing in. So it's affecting all of us. Some of us are getting these chemicals in our homes. How many of you get these chemicals in your homes? I just want to know who smell it when you in your bed sleeping. Just, okay, y'all bring they can't up, y'all. We need people to know I'm in my own house, minding my business, living my life, and these chemicals are waking me up out of my
Are we just talking about St. Rose or just in general?
goodness, I'm talking about in general.
Oh, for sure. It's for chemicals. Yes, when we lived in Norco, it was so bad. I got sick living in Norco. I would wake up in the middle of the night with the flares going so bad that our house was shaking and I was having a panic attack. And it wasn't just once. And we didn't even know who to report it to because we would try doing it to the companies and they don't listen to us. I didn't even realize I could be reporting that kind of stuff to LDEQ. I thought they wanted hard and fast numbers. because they keep us uninformed on purpose. This should be public knowledge. This should be something that our public government is posting to their Facebook page, but they don't.
They don't want to. They don't want it to come out. So that's why I talked about systems. And we talk about systems. We have our governmental system that's supposed to be protecting the people. We have the system of chemical plants. Industry is a system. So when you have individuals, those individuals hide behind that system. So what we have to do, I don't want to be out speaking on behalf of anybody. I want to be able to speak on behalf of myself alongside my other sisters and brothers and cousins and friends who are standing up, speaking about themselves and their families. So they're now good from the system. It's everybody moving together, and nothing's going to be done until we stand together and say, I might not be experiencing this in my house, but my cousin, my friend, my sister, my brother, they're experiencing this in their homes. But when I walk out my house, I smell it. And when I drive by the facility, IMTT, I smell it. My children are suffering. My parents, my grandparents died because of cancer and respiratory issues. Mr. Leroy, he fought in 2014. He fought for all of us. He stood up with Nikki Zarain and all of you, Lenora, all of you who stood up back in 2014. But he's not with us today. But before he passed away, I asked him, because I had to search and see who was standing up in my community. I asked Mr. Leroy, so are you still smelling those chemicals in your house? He said, yes. He could not talk to me very long. He said, because after COVID, he could not breathe the same. So his breathing was very limited. But he stood in 2014, and he's not with us. But we have to pick up that torch. The torch that those who stood before us, we have to pick that torch up and we have to carry it on. And we have to keep carrying it until it's done. And stop letting IMTP bamboozle us. That's what they're doing. You were at the CAP meeting. I was at that CAP meeting, Community Advisory Panel meeting, about the community monitoring. And when I asked the question about the individual chemicals, some of us met with the people at Lean, Mary Orr, who's over Lean, who's partnering with IMTT. And it's trickery. It's trickery. That monitor is not going to help us. And those are very intelligent people that work at IMTT. They know the chemicals that they're emitting, and they know which chemicals they don't want to pick up on that sensor, because Dr. Kimbrelle Terrell told us that's not a proper monitor. So we need to tell them, we'll take your monitor if you monitor, like Dr. Kimbrelle Terrell said, if you monitor the benzene, the toluene, the hexanes, all of those chemicals, yes. But until then, no. No, because we're not stupid and we want to live and breathe clean air just like you and your family. Ancient.
I have a couple of questions. We're talking about community voices a lot. My family's pretty private. I can't imagine they'd be that willing to share their personal stories about a fight with cancer or something like that. So I know LDEQ has an option to submit an anonymous comment. Yeah. It's fine. Do these other agencies, what's the best way to submit an anonymous comment to LDNR, LDEQ, that sort of thing? Through phone, through email?
For anyone who couldn't hear, the question was, what's the best way to submit an anonymous complaint to DEQ or DNR or any other agency?
So DEQ phone is the best way. So that number that we showed on the screen. Also, if you just Google DEQ citizen complaint, you'll find a page with that number. A couple caveats. They only accept phone calls between 8:30 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. You'll have to leave a message if you call outside those hours. Also, keep in mind, any complaint or report is better than nothing, right? The minimum information you want to give is where it happened and when. Ideally, including health effects and more information can be helpful, but keep in mind also anything that you give over the phone is going to be interpreted and recorded by a human on the other end. And I've heard from folks in Jefferson Parish that they've, reported odor problems and their complaints don't get captured and recorded accurately. So if accuracy is important, do it using the online form. I know it's a pain in the butt because I do it myself all the time and it's easy to feel overwhelmed. And what I do is some days I'm like, you know what? Not going to happen today. And that's okay. It'll happen tomorrow. It'll happen next week. I need to preserve my mental health because you will drive yourself insane if you try to report every single odor, right? But phone call is the best way to do it anonymously. Any complaint is better than no complaint. Keep in mind, you don't have to be at your home to report, right? So if I'm in my neighborhood, if I go to get a pizza and I'm outside the pizza place and it stinks, I'm reported that. You can put an intersection, you can put a block number. You don't have to put your home address. If you do put your home address, that is going to be in the public DEQ system. And I know a lot of people may not be comfortable with that. But at the end of the day, from me in my neighborhood, the reports are the only evidence we have because the facility is now required to monitor. They make all kinds of crazy claims. And at the end of the day, what they can't argue with is the fact that in my neighborhood, there's been 400 different homes reporting, right? And that must be some big conspiracy theory if 400 of my closest friends have listened to me and started complaining. So I know it's harder when you have a smaller community, but I'm also really encouraged to see people hear from other St. Charles communities because I think that can help get your numbers up.
We only have about 5 more minutes. So, how many of you would like for Tulane Environmental Law Clinic to come back? Okay. So both days we'll come back and answer more questions and we could, keep this dialogue open. So we're gonna do some door prizes. Anona and Tracy are gonna help us with those.